Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining me and thanks for the intro. I'm Sarah Hashkis. I'm recording this a little bit before you're actually listening and seeing me, so I hope the world still exists out there. We're living in very strange times right now, but these are times when actually spatial computing is really, really needed. And we have the power to bridge some of the needs that exist right now out in the world. And I'm really excited to talk to you about how we can do this. And I'm especially excited to talk to you about the missing puzzle piece that I think spatial computing needs, and that's human movement data. So let's just jump right into it. And I'm going to talk to you today about what is human data, why is it so important, how can we use it for XR, and what can we do when we start combining this data with AI. So 3D movement data is a time series of positional vectors, X, Y, and Z, and rotations, sometimes we like to call them quaternions, that you basically map onto a skeleton model. The skeleton model could be really simple, just a head and two hands, or it could be much more complex. For instance, on the right, you see me when I was in academia with all these little white balls on me. Each of these balls represented a position in space along with the rotation that got correlated to one of my body joints. And you can even see the camera in the background that was picking up the reflections off these balls. So there's lots of different file formats that are used with this movement data. And right now, or at least until recently, mostly this data was used either in motion capture for animation, movies, games, or in academic research. Now, I don't come from animation and movie industry, really. I come from academia, so we're going to be focused on that. But the interesting thing, and why I'm talking to all of you about this right now, is that there is a massive growing market, even before coronavirus, that brought in these devices that are able to record 3D movement data, right? Whether it's the consumer VR headsets that give us 6 degrees of freedom of our hands and head, or we see the Intel depth camera, or even the newest iPhone cameras that are able to detect poses. So suddenly, from just becoming a very expensive way to gather this data, we actually have consumer devices that can do that. So let's just jump into a bit of why this data is so important, what weird things we can do with it in academia. So I was really focused on, can we increase learning of difficult movements? I put people in different types of avatars that were able to do these movements. We were doing a circle with one hand and a square with another. You can try right now to see how difficult this actually is for brains. Unless you're a drummer, this is basically proven to be one of the hardest tasks we can do. And I wanted to see if I could get people to do this, learn this faster and easier if I put them in an avatar that was able to do these movements. I wanted to see what happened when I actually messed up their proprioception and visual perceptions they were getting from their own bodies, which you can see on the left picture. So when a person was moving their right hand, it seemed as if their left hand was moving, right? So these are types of interferences we can do with virtual reality and gather movement data and start analyzing which one of these conditions work better to teach people. So you can read the actual paper. I'll leave it as a mystery to you, which of these conditions actually worked. A really, really cool experiment that I like, because we don't just need to have movement data about our actual bodies, we can start augmenting our very bodies. So this is a research paper that they did about controlling a virtual tail with hip movements. And by gathering data about a person's movements, we could actually start increasing our abilities with fake body parts and augmenting ourselves. Movement data isn't only important for physical research, it's also super important for things like emotional well-being, regulation, treating depression. We are embodied creatures. Whatever we feel stems from us having bodies and brains interacting with environments. One of the really most inspiring researches that I came across was this research by Faulkner. Basically, they took a person that was really highly depressed, medication was not working on these groups of people, and they put them in VR where they were taking care of a child avatar along with a therapist. The child was crying, and the patient was sort of treating the child. And the next condition of this experiment, the person was put into the body of a child, and received and perceived their own care that they were giving, their body language, their hugs, or so their voices. And this was really proven to help improve a person's depression and help them self-regulate. So just by taking and recording a person's body movements and then seeing yourself from another point, from a point of a child, you can remap really deep neural pathways in your brain. And that's why movement data is just so incredibly important. The basics of how we connect as humans is built on physical mimicry. And anybody that's interacted with a child really knows that. I used to teach kids a lot of self-defense, and you just see how they constantly copy you, right? So this is how we actually perceive and connect to each other with these larger bandwidths. Now, I'm going to go on a little bit of a detour, a tiny 3-minute detour about brains, because anytime I get an audience, I really want to tell people about the predictive coding framework. This really helps understand how we interface with our environment and how we can use technology to actually augment ourselves. So I think it's important. So brains are actually prediction machines, right? We don't have access to anything that's out there. We only have access to what's ever is basically coming in from our senses, our eyes, our ears, smell, touch, proprioception. There's really a lot of signals coming from our body. But the other part of it is actually the things that your brain already knows, things that have, you've modeled before. They're called priors. Or predictions in neuroscience language. And these two sources of information are constantly combined. Now, the reason for this is basically from an evolutionary perspective, our data is really noisy, what's coming from our senses. So we use the previous model, we use what we previously learned to try to not make a terrible mess out of your life and guide our behavior into self-sustaining behaviors that will keep us alive. So here's what I was saying, right? We combine past and present information streams to create our current sense of perception and actually make any type of decisions too. A nice metaphor that I like to give people is imagine your brain is building sandcastles, right? Creating reality is actually a creation process. The sand is incoming bottom-up signal from your senses, while the buckets you use are these top-down priors, your previous knowledge that your brain tries to fit the signals into. And when we start actually interfacing with technology, we can see that we can affect mostly the sand. This incoming bottom-up signals is very easy for us as designers, especially of immersive and XR technology, to start changing. So I like to give people a little feeling. What does that mean that predictions actually affect your perception? So this is a famous Margaret Thatcher illusion. We're seeing Margaret Thatcher upside down, and now she's not upside down. These are exactly the same photos, but when you see the photo on the left is really way weird and morphed when it's not upside down. You can do this again, upside down. Oh, they look pretty similar. Rotate them around, oops, one of them is just absolutely horrendous, or you see it's really different. The reason for that is because our predictions of faces that are upright are much more detailed. We constantly go around the world seeing faces in the normal, the upright position. So the moment anything changes with upright faces, we are able to perceive that change, that prediction error, much more strongly than upside down faces. Now, the brain has this hierarchical organization. There's various parts that deal with specific stimuli, and then higher levels, the stimuli starts coming together, creating more complex models of the world. Now, one of the very basic and most important things your brain is constantly doing is trying to decide, what is this self-organism versus what is the environment up there? Now, the way your brain does that is really just by combining statistical information from your different senses. And this is very flexible. If any of you know the rubber hand experiment, if I take a rubber hand and touch it at the same time that you're seeing your own hand being touched and feeling your own hand being touched, your brain starts modeling that rubber hand as your hand. So your sense of self versus environment is really mutable and can change and is dependent on your proprioception data, right? Where you are, the feelings of where you are in space and That type of information is really what we can start gathering and mutating with human movement data. And that's where the link comes, right? Anything that we want to do with ourselves, we require this movement data. We need to be able to start communicating that between our computers, our devices, to our own eyes, ears, proprioception. And when we look at spatial computing, this is why I say this is the missing piece of the puzzle. We see, especially in AR, right? We're augmenting the environment. We can place things in our environment, we can morph our environment, but if we really want to humanize technology, we need to start building experiences for our whole body, experiences that bring our body into the environment, experiences that augment our body, experiences where we can interact with the fullness of our body. And the only way I know how to do that is if we start treating movement data as a really important resource, as a new type of media that allows us to create these types of connections. So this isn't just a like awesome to have thing. It is also a amazing business opportunity, because this type of data can transform the way we do social gaming. It can transform education of any type of movement-based skill. It can transform the fitness industry, and it can transform entertainment. And this was prior Corona times, right? Especially now when people cannot actually be together in physical space, this type of movement data has the ability to bridge some of those gaps and bring in expert teachers in 3D to be able to give you accurate feedback of your movements, or even just for you to be able to interact with your favorite entertainers and musicians in your own space in 3 dimensions. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what I've been building over the last year and a half in order to sort of bridge that gap, and how I see the future of this rolling. So we've been building a platform called Miu, and my company, we're called Radix Motion, and we're trying to really create this new form of communication that is based on 3D movement data. I can record your movements and then put different types of filters on them, connect them to different types of feedbacks, auditory, visual, particle effects based on your posture, and then let you send that 3D representation of yourself to other people that can then interact with it. And now it could be either in VR, of course, VR is way more immersive, but we can also work on mobile AR phones that are then interactable in space. I'm gonna show you a short video just so you get an idea, and we're gonna hopefully be showing this also at the playground where you can actually play with it, and this is out there for free for anyone who wants to try. So yeah, let's play the video. Okay, so you have the ability, which is in here, to actually teach people movement. And of course, this is at the beginning, we're just using the current consumer device and enhance with kinetics to parts of the body. We're hoping to get more and more parts of the body into it. And you can even dance and run around catching your friends' kisses in space. I actually saw Who Framed Roger Rabbit not long ago and realized I might have gotten the idea from there subconsciously. That was a funny moment. So we started creating 3D enhanced dance parties to get people not just sit on a couch and Zoom, but to actually go into VR, send their dances, and then they can send their dance to anybody else that's in the party. They can send them to people on mobile phones where they can run around the room and interact and dance. It's a really, really interesting experiment. We're slowly taking it, more and more in different directions, letting artists curate their own experiences. And we're really, really curious to see where this takes us. So this is why basically, like, if there's one thing I would like you to get from this whole lecture, is that the future of human communication is in 3D movement data, because that's what we need to maintain our humanity. We really have to find ways to interact with each other, not just through our fingertips and screens and mouses, but through our whole body, if we want to maintain empathy and increase the bandwidth of our connection with each other. And really last thing about AI, right? So we're constantly building these artificial intelligence neural networks that are able to predict massive amounts of things around us. And if we want these AIs to actually be able to understand us, to be on our side, to be able to feel, to at least model compassion and care, they really need to be able to actually understand our bodies, right? Because that is how we understand each other. And that's why I'm fascinated to, of course, like Radix Motion is super, super curious about. That's one of the reasons I got into making my own business, is because I want to align users' data with what's for their benefit, and ask them, what do you want to be done with your data? That's something we super care about. But we see massive amount of potential and actually creating AIs that are beneficial for our well-being with this data. So thank you very much for listening. I'm available for some questions, and I hope all of you are a part of the future of human communication. Thanks.
Hey, Sarah, excellent presentation. Eamon here. I feel like I've been doing this for a while now, trying to, since you said it.
Yeah.
You have a very interesting background in neuroscience research and also martial arts.
Yep. Yeah, I'm a self-defense and martial arts instructor, originally from Israel. The best gift I got from my dad was starting to train since I was like 6 years old.
That's very cool. Yeah, if I have a daughter, I definitely train her in something like Krav Maga, very effective.
Yeah. We actually have a self-defense app in VR. You can look it up. It's called Empower VR. I sort of did it pro bono for in a hackathon. It's on the Oculus Store.
That's very exciting. Actually, that leads into some of the questions that are coming in for you.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to kind of paraphrase them because you mentioned martial arts is a good use case for human movement data. So is dance, obviously, with all the Dance Revolution, Beat Saber like games. What other applications do you see with 3D movement data, like in mental health, for example?
Yeah, so we're talking to a lot of experts in the field. I'm in neuroscience, not a health professional. But for instance, last talk I had was with a chiropractor that is actually focused on healing through letting the body feel safe, right? And can we use this technology to allow people to feel safe in their own bodies that will increase their healing speed? So there's really so much that connects the mind-body connection that we can start influencing by giving people feedback and slowly changing how they view themselves. That's one application. And the other is massive applications, obviously for anything to do with like PTSD and being able to recreate and control giant humans that you can now puppet. At least that's been very helpful for me. I wrote a Medium article post about that. I can share with people if they want to read more.
No, I think that would be a great thing to share in the chat. That someone else was asking about incorporating your own personal avatar, and I can totally see this being used to control giant AR Gundams or something like that.
Yeah, so that's definitely on our roadmap. That's part of why we're crowdfunding right now. So we would love people's support to build this. We definitely know that the avatar, well, you can generate a lot of different options with it and colors and particles. We need to let people to import their own avatars. And that's definitely the first thing on our roadmap that we're building.
Nice. Now, good plug for the WeFunder application you've got going. Good luck with the crowdfunding. I saw your presentation at the startup presentations yesterday. So good luck with all the, building, and I hope it goes really well for you.
Other dance, I just want to point out the dance we're seeing right in a second is the winning dance yesterday by Kevin Ang. We had a interactive dance-off competition and he won. So it was really fun. Even though we're virtual, we can't actually be in the playground right now to get people actually off their chairs and dancing and moving. And thanks. Yeah, I hope you can all try it out.
No, I think this is a great use of something that we need as humans in order to communicate in a time where we can't be around other humans. So I'm hoping that the more you do with your app, the more this becomes something that we use to communicate with each other.
Yeah, thank you.